Alright guys, so before I begin, I just want to put a disclaimer out there that I have never installed a subframe before like this on a car. This is my first time, so I just want to give a real life experience and just give you guys the knowledge that I have gained from researching, and I believe this is the proper way of installing and squaring up the subframe. As you may or may not know, you can't just bolt on the subframe back on the car, because this might be out of line or might throw the wheels off, so you have to square up the whole subframe. And what I did was, which I'll show you in the video, but I have plumb bobs that I dropped down and I took measurements off of a stationary point and to various areas on the subframe. So there are alignment holes in the body of the car, and the subframe, you have to put a rod up through the subframe and have these alignment holes within the body. But a lot of the times these alignment holes might be off, or that's just not the correct way of doing things. You have to take some other measurements on top of that. This makes sense logically to me, so I'm going to be doing a combination of the plumb bob measurements along with using the alignment holes at the same time. Figured I'd tell you that before I started, but I think everything turned out. It's done now as I'm speaking, but it turned out good. Hope you enjoy the video. So before I go ahead and try to install the subframe, I have to organize everything with this new bolt kit. This is the energy suspension, part number 3-4142. It's kind of confusing on the proper sequence of everything, and you definitely need some sort of measuring tool. I'm using a digital caliper here, so just a cheap one from Harbor Freight. Make sure you zero it out and everything first, because you do need to measure a couple differences between these sleeves here, because they are pretty close. So I have it organized in position 1, 2, and 3. Position 1 will be marked on here, frontmost towards the radiator core support. 2 would be towards the middle, and the 3rd would be by the transmission. They have all these different layouts and everything, but there are a couple differences, like the supplied sleeve. It's 1.282 overall length. So what you have to do is pick up a couple different sleeves. You could probably find this one just by eyeing it because it's the shortest length. You want to measure from this top to the very bottom of this sleeve here, and that should measure out to be around 1.282. So you know that goes to position 1, so you match those up. Now the second position here, this is really close. If you just go like that, you can't tell a difference between these two. So position 2 should have a overall length of 1.495. Mine came to be about 1.5 inches, so a little bit different, but they both are the same, 1.5 inches from top to the very bottom of that. And then this last one, sleeve, is 1.410. So you can see very similar in length. So definitely get a micrometer. That isn't labeled. The rest of them are nice because, well, besides the inside diameter of these washers, the smallest hole goes towards the front, so we have 4 of those, and then these last couple are all the same. They're 5/8 inside diameter for this hole, so those, we have 2 for that and 2 for the 3rd position that are the same. And then for the matching up of the rubber sleeves, these are actually stamped, so I wish they would have just stamped these. It would have been way faster instead of spending 20 minutes looking for measuring tool and measuring it all out. But these are actually stamped 4004. So just for an example, 4004 goes to position 2. So you just find that, and then I still have to figure out the layout of exactly if this is the top or the bottom right here on how the bolts go. So that matters versus which way to put this one versus this one. So I got to see if this goes on the top like this or if it goes on the bottom like that. So I have to look at my old washers and spacers and all that from when I took it out of the car, so I'm gonna go find those now. And then of course I have these bags labeled too, for the different positions, 1, 2, and 3. So I know I can slap everything in here for number 2. When I'm out there underneath the car, I won't mix up anything.
raised up more.
You have to go higher.
Yeah.
Let me grab something to put under that stove over there. I'll jack this up a little bit now.
Alright.
You ready?
Yeah.
Your end's probably not going up.
It's going up, but not very. I need to pull it forward now.
Okay, wait, let
I
me
could
get
actually
there
start if
started
I
now.
pulled it forward. Yeah. It's almost started if I can just get it a little bit. There, I got started. Alright, leave it go. There. Yeah. Let me try to get the other one in now.
Before I start squaring up everything right now, I bought some 5/8 inch all thread, and that fits perfectly into these alignment holes from the factory. So make sure you put that in first on both sides, probably about 8 inches on each side, just so you have enough if you have to use leverage to pull this back and forth. I just have 6 inches here, and it's kind of cutting it close with being leverage wise. So give yourself enough all thread. They're cheap. I should have just bought two 12-inch pieces since they were like $1.50 each. But anyway, I just cut that one in half and put one on here and one on the other side. And that way you can line up everything. But just a little tip, you don't have to buy those expensive ones from $30 for 2 things from Summit Racing. Just buy some 5/8 inch all thread and you'll be good. It'll be fit in there perfectly. So the next step is you have to level the subframe after hand tightening the bolts of the subframe. So you do this by getting a magnetic leveler and then jacking up the front and or the rear of the car, putting jack stands under the pinch welds, and you are now able to start putting down the plumb bobs.
So these are going to be our 2 stationary points in the back of the car. Right here, we're going on the inside, wrapping it around the string on each side. This is right by the eyelet of where the rear leaf spring goes through. This should be 37 1/8 from center to this one to the center of the other one. So what we did was drop a plumb line down on each one, marked it on the bottom there, and then now we can start taking our measurements. Make sure you do level out the front of the subframe so this is all level, and then we're going to drop some plumb lines from a couple other points in the front now. So we want to measure the wheelbase length first, according to what I've been reading online. Back and front motion, you want to get that straight first. So these stationary points in the back right there and the back over on that side, we want to measure from the subframe point to the rear end where the leaf split is kind of near for that hole. So once we get that within 1/8 of an inch of each other, we should be good to go ahead and start doing diagonal measurements from the front to there and from the front to the other one. Okay, so we measured between these 2 points right here. So this is the stationary point over there to the front of the subframe that we still have. And then I did the same thing on the other side, that to that. We were 1/16 of an inch off, so the wheelbase right now is correct. It's no more than 1/8 of an inch off, so it's 1/16 of an inch. So we're good there. We then measured from here to there, and from there to there, cross diagonal, and that's within tolerance as well. And then lastly, we're going to put another plumb line in the front here just to make sure everything is good. I'm going to find one of the lines, as long as they match on each side, drop it down from this one, drop another one down from this one, and then measure from diagonally from this one to the driver's side rear. So right there to the passenger side front, up in there, and then do the same thing, diagonal measurement from the rear stationary point of the passenger side to the front driver's side by the steering column. And as long as that's 1/8 of an inch, within 1/8 of an inch difference at the most, then we should be set to start tightening everything up and checking that along the way to make sure nothing shifts in the process of tightening everything. So after doing the measurements on the front of this, dropping the plumb line from here, and then going diagonal across, so the driver's side front subframe to the passenger side rear stationary point by the rear leaf spring that we mentioned already, that one, and then doing another same measurement on this front passenger side subframe to the rear driver's side stationary point. It was a 32nd of an inch off, so well within that 1/8 of an inch. So we lucked out, didn't have to move it. Some people say that just using some of this 5/8 inch rod with the points on each side, that's good enough. But I just wanted to check just to make sure, and everything was within spec. I would still do it over with the plumb lines, just make sure that this 5/8 inch rod is up there on each side, and then you can start dropping the lines. And if you need to move anything, use these as leverage. But I didn't have to move anything. Everything else fell into place and everything is square right now. So now my only other worry is I have to cut into the floor to correct this back, that rearmost subframe, not right here, but this one right here underneath the floor. The captive nut spun. If you've watched this episode when I dropped the whole subframe, that trying to figure out what to do without welding stuff or cutting stuff, but fortunately I just have to cut into the floor. So I'm just gonna have to start cutting in the floor now and then tightening every nut and bolt up very slowly, and then I'll do a final measurement to make sure everything is still within spec of that 1/8 of an inch for everything. And then we should be good to start adding everything else. Wait for that stupid thing to spin. Oh wow. Very surprised that nut didn't turn, because this one was messed up a little bit too. Alright, really relieved. I ended up getting that last subframe bolt tightened up. So that means I don't have to cut into this floor. So what I did, I decided to start tightening everything up before I was just going to cut in the floor first. But I was like, you know what, let's tighten everything up. Make sure everything is going up evenly, torque everything down to specs, which by the way is 30 to 40 foot-pounds on the frontmost of the car by the radiator core support. Everything else is 70 to 90 foot-pounds, so I went to 87 foot-pounds on everything. I'm going to retighten those back up when everything's back on the ground. But so I tightened everything up, all 5 of the bolts, went to the back subframe bolt and decided to use an impact on it, and it shot it right up. So it must have caught itself in the perfect spot, and it wasn't cross-threaded or anything, so I really lucked out. Torqued down perfectly with my wrench after I used the impact. Went down to 87 foot-pounds perfectly. So I should be set. That saves me so much work. So relieved that I don't have to do that, and that saves my floor.